California, in the eyes of the world, it is a land of sunny beaches, Hollywood stars, and endless opportunities. But behind this bright image, a dark world was growing for decades. This world was not built in deserts, nor in the mountains. Its center was hidden behind iron bars, concrete walls, and the confines of maximum security prisons. The system created there did not only control inmates. Over time, it began to influence and control the streets as well, and the name of that system was EME, better known as the Mexican Mafia. Today, we tell a story of crime, power, fear, and loyalty. This is not simply the story of an organization's rise. It is the story of how an influence born behind prison walls came to shape an entire criminal underworld. Late 1950s, California's prisons were filling up rapidly. Young offenders from different neighborhoods and backgrounds were beginning to share the same cell blocks. Racial and regional tensions were rising with each passing day. For many inmates, survival was often more important than the sentence handed down by the court. In this environment, a number of Hispanic prisoners began to unite. At first, their goal was simple: to protect one another. In 1957, a new organization emerged inside the Dual Vocational Institution, a correctional facility in California. This group would later become one of the most influential prison gangs in history. One of the figures often associated with its founding was Luis Flores. The new group's name was the Mexican Mafia. Its members, however, called it by another name, EME, the Spanish pronunciation of the letter M. At first, their numbers were small, but what they possessed was far more powerful than their size, discipline, loyalty, and fear. EME quickly began attracting attention among other inmates. Its rules were strict. Disobedience was not tolerated. The price of betrayal was severe. As a result, the organization became both respected and feared throughout the prison system. By the 1960s, California's prison system was beginning to change. Authorities sought to prevent gang growth by dispersing members across different correctional facilities. However, the outcome was very different from what they had expected, as members were transferred to different prisons. The organization spread with them. In a sense, the authorities' strategy unintentionally expanded EME's influence. Before long, the organization had become known throughout multiple correctional institutions. It is widely reported that the group began gaining influence over drug trafficking, illegal gambling, and various other criminal activities. EME's power did not come from violence alone. The organization also placed great value on information. Who was connected to whom? Who could be trusted? Who posed a threat? The answers to these questions were extremely valuable to the organization. Within the prison environment, information was often more powerful than a weapon. Even rumors circulating among inmates could sometimes lead to major consequences. EME recognized this reality very early on. After some time, a significant change began to take place. Inmates started being released from prison, but those who walked out did not leave their past behind. On the contrary, they carried the system they had learned inside prison out onto the streets. Their influence over various street gangs in Southern California gradually began to grow. Over time, many groups found themselves having to consider the power dynamics that existed within the prison system. As a result, EME was no longer just a prison organization. It became a bridge between the prison system and the streets. This transformation marked one of the most important turning points in the organization's history. Its influence now extended far beyond concrete walls and prison fences. However, growing power would also bring new enemies in the years that followed. California's prisons would become the stage for intense and often violent rivalries, and those rivalries would shape not only life behind bars, but also the criminal landscape beyond the prison walls. By the 1970s, California's prisons were no longer just places where inmates were held. They had become arenas of power struggles, where complex balances were formed and shifting alliances constantly emerged. As La EME's influence grew, the organization began encountering new rivals. Each group tried to protect its own sphere of influence. These struggles inside prisons often spilled over into the streets outside, a conflict that began in one correctional facility could be felt hundreds of miles away in distant neighborhoods. This made the work of law enforcement increasingly difficult because they were no longer dealing with individual crimes, but with interconnected networks. One of La EME's greatest advantages was its disciplined structure according to the organization's rules. Decisions once made were not questioned. This system created a strong sense of loyalty among its members. However, it also increased internal pressure within the organization, because those who violated the rules faced severe consequences. As a result, members were influenced not only by external threats, but also by the expectations within the organization itself. As La EME's rise continued, law enforcement agencies were not standing still. A new era would begin in the 1980s. From the 1980s onward, various security agencies in the United States began to focus more intensively on organized crime structures. Authorities believed that La EME was not merely a group operating inside prisons. Investigations increasingly focused on understanding the organization's connections to the outside world. Phone records were being examined. Financial transactions were being tracked. Information was being gathered from informants. This process continued for many years. Some operations were successful, while others did not produce the expected results, because members of the organization had developed security measures over many years. When authorities arrested one leader, someone else often took their place. This highlighted a common problem in the fight against organized crime. Eliminating individual leaders was not always enough to dismantle the entire structure. In organizations with a long history, the system itself often became more resilient than the individuals within it. Investigations into La EME revealed this reality as well. However, the greatest challenge the organization faced was not only law enforcement. Times were changing, and a changing world was also reshaping criminal organizations. The 1990s and 2000s, communication technologies were rapidly advancing. Security systems were becoming more modern. Digital records, surveillance cameras, and new investigative techniques were beginning to transform the world of crime. Many activities that once could remain hidden were now easier to track. This development affected not only La EME, but many organized crime structures. Organizations were forced to adapt to new conditions. However, every change also brought new risks, because technology strengthened not only criminals, but also law enforcement agencies. Information that once could only be obtained through informants could now be uncovered through different methods. For this reason, criminal organizations began to act with greater caution. Yet, when looking at the history of organized crime, one common truth emerges. No structure remains the same forever. Conditions change, leaders change, rules change, and sometimes even the most powerful organizations lose their former influence. So what does La EME mean to do? An organization, a symbol, or a legacy shaped over decades within prison culture? Today, when discussing La EME, there is an important point that must be considered. In popular culture, criminal organizations are often portrayed as mysterious and powerful structures. Films and television series sometimes depict this world in a way that differs from reality. However, Real life is far more complex. In regions where organized crime exists, violence, fear, and social problems also emerge for this reason. The story of EME is not only the story of a criminal organization, it is also the story of social conditions, the prison system, and the broader struggle against crime. Experts have long been trying to answer a key question. Why do such structures emerge? There is no single answer to this question. Economic conditions, social environment, crime culture, prison experience, all of these can play a role to different degrees. History of EME is also evaluated as part of this complex process. The story of EME reminds us once again of something important in the world of crime. Many victories that appear to be won are followed by lives that have been lost, and sometimes, even the highest walls are not enough to hide the consequences of human choices. Thank you for watching.